Have you ever tried walking on a tightrope without a safety net? That's exactly how I felt diving into the most intense, life-changing personal development and dating rules I could have ever imagined. We're talking about fear, courage, and raw honesty like you've never experienced. Buckle up, because today's video might be the scariest yet most liberating ride of your life. You'll get the rules that changed my life, plus 2 bonus spiritual laws that can change the quality of your life, your influence, and your income. Stay with me. Let's roll. Aloha, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, your guide to vibrant living. And on this channel, you get entertainment, inspiration, and empowerment to live your greatest, most vibrant, thriving life. This goes back to 1999. I had been living in Spain. My friend Ketan told me about this radical therapy center in Holland. So radical, he said, they're getting amazing results, great personal development. A friend of his went there and actually was having a relationship and sleeping with one of the therapists. Now, I thought, this is all strange, interesting. What really caught my attention, though, was his use of the word intensity and how profound the results were. By this point in my life, I was already committed to personal and spiritual development, and I went on the internet, looked it up, looked pretty interesting, sent them an email. It was actually my very first email, and a few weeks later, I arrive in Holland at a place called Humaniversity. I thought I was pretty sophisticated. I had been doing intense therapeutic work for years. I had lived at Esalen Institute, Omega Institute. I'd studied transpersonal psychology, Gestalt therapy. I'd hit pillows with styrofoam bats. I thought I'd been around the block. A little bravado. And within a short time of my arrival, though, I was properly checked into place. There was a long intake interview, and they asked me a ton of questions, and so as confident as I had been walking in there, pretty soon, upon the good questions and the examination of my life, I realized there were some things that were not really working the way I wanted in my life, and that they had a lot to teach me. As part of the intake process, we also had an HIV test, something I'd never experienced, and I soon learned that amongst the radical and intense therapeutic processes they used, the woman who ran the group I was part of, the group is called the Tourist Program, her name is Lucy. And she was like half dorm mother, half therapist. And she explained that dating is an agreement to spend time with someone. Now that could be a walk on the beach, that could be having a meal together, that could be sleeping together. Sleeping together could involve sexual activity or not. Dating means an agreement to spend time with each other. And part of what she explained is that they emphasize dating because, well, it teaches us a lot, and the love and intimacy that can be created with that really nicely offsets some of the intense confrontative type therapies. She also explained that at Humaniversity there are rules for dating. 2 rules. Are you ready? Number 1 is always go for your first choice. Always go for your first choice. How's that landing? Now, it took me a few minutes to grok that, to realize that, well, because first I thought, well, yeah, of course I always go for my first choice. But then I thought about it a little bit more and I realized, not always, because what happens for so many of us is we think, oh, I'd really like to go for that person, and then some judgment comes in like, oh, they might be out of my league, or they might not say yes, so the challenge level, the likelihood that they'll say yes to me, maybe is a little too high for my comfort because I fear, what do I fear? I fear rejection, right? I fear they will say no to me, right? That I'll get rejected. Now, this is fascinating because are they rejecting me? Sit with that for a minute. So rule number 1, always go for your first choice, is not quite so simple, and it's actually a pretty scary thing because, as Ani DeFranco sang in one of her songs, I like you so much, I'll talk to everyone else but you. It's worth pointing out that in the structure of this community, there were also some basic guidelines that were in operation, which were, 1, a general agreement that we will be honest with each other, and 2, that we will be caring with each other. Years before this, I had read an amazing book by Brad Blanton called Radical Honesty: How Telling the Truth Will Change Your Life. Part of what he teaches in there is tell the raw, unedited truth no matter what. And if anyone else has a problem with it, if they get hurt, that's their problem. There is a great benefit to that. There's a lot of learning in it, and it can be a recipe for cruelty, for pain. So the general guidelines of we'll be honest with each other and we'll care for each other were in place. So rule number 1, always go for your first choices, a little bit set upon that foundation. And you get a sense of how that can be a bit scary for most of us, how most of us often don't go for our first choice. Now, it gets better though. You ready? Rule number 2 is if they say no, then ask them why. Doesn't take so much to realize that that one is really scary. Why is that one scary? Well, because if they say no, if they have, quote, rejected us, what does that mean? I ask them why. What are they going to do? They're going to tell me, this is often the way fear works. We don't even know what it is we're afraid of, but we're afraid of something. And so we stop ourselves. Here is the amazing part of rule number 2 though. When we ask why, we get to hear some information. Now the information could be, it has something to do with me. The reason they said no to the date. By the way, do you get that distinction? They said no to my invitation, which was to spend time together. They didn't say no to me, they said no to the date. If they said no to the date, option 1, they say a reason why, which has something to do with me. We'll come back to that. Or option 2, they say no, and the reason is it has nothing to do with me. One of the fascinating things about us humans is we are meaning-making machines. What that entails is that no matter what's going on in the world, we make up a meaning about it, we make up a story about it. And when there isn't clear information, well, we're especially active in filling in the gaps and trying to create an explanation for ourselves. And unless we've done an incredible amount of healing about how we see ourselves and how we see the world, very oftentimes the meaning we make up is one that is not a happy one. Show you what I mean. We could hear from someone that the reason they said no is because they're in a relationship with someone else and it's exclusive. Or I asked them to go for a walk with me on Friday and, well, I'm going to be out of town on Friday. Or they just got out of a relationship with some YouTuber who's got a shaved head. And so the idea of going for a walk with another one's a little bit scary. Or they're in the middle of a year of you get the idea, right? Might have nothing to do with us. And would that be really useful information? Now, on the flip side, if the reason they said no does have something to do with me, well, that is powerful. That ties into what I wrote about in my book as a spiritual law. This particular spiritual law is number 24. The truth shall set us. Why is it blank? Well, because it works better if you fill it in. Yes, the truth will set us free. And when we get the truth, when we fill in the blank, that means we own it. We take responsibility for it. So when I get information about myself, I own that information. I get to choose what to do with it. And just like all art is dependent on getting feedback, we as humans, as the artists of our own life, we need feedback in order to make our lives into a masterpiece. What is so beautiful here and so important to get is that if we get this information, we get to choose. I can say, yeah, I agree with that, thank you. Or I can say, no, I don't see myself that way, thank you. Or I can say, yeah, I agree with that, that's how I am, and I like myself that way. Or I can get it and say, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. That's something I want to change. Here's a real world example that I saw back then. I had been in the program for just a few days, And we were in a small group, what we called a family, and so we're getting to know each other very well through these therapeutic processes and living together. There was a man there from Germany, Gunther was his name, and he took a shining to an Israeli woman. So it wasn't long before he asked her on a date, and her response? No. What did he do? A good student, he said, why? She, obliging, being supportive, honest, and caring, she told him why. The reason she told him was because every time we hug, she said, and we did a lot of hugging at Humaniversity, every time we hug, I have the feeling that you're more getting something than giving something. Now, I don't know how that would land for you. For me, if I heard that, that would hurt. I would be not only embarrassed, I would not be happy with how I'm coming across. So I really wondered what Gunther would do with that. And he took it in and he did the most amazing, powerful thing. And this is such a big lesson, such a big opportunity for you. It is also another of the spiritual laws from my book. This one is number 25, and it goes like this. In the face of feedback, say, thank you. Now, why that is so valuable is because when we get feedback, a few things can happen. We can get feedback from someone, they tell us something, and we might right away defend ourselves. No, I'm not like that. Don't tell me that, that's not true, and then, or give an explanation. That defensiveness is a sure sign that, well, there's some truth in that feedback. Or we might get feedback from someone and right away say, oh, you're totally right, I always do that, that's just how I am. That quick agreement is also a sure sign that there's something in it. So the upgraded, better way of working with feedback is simply to say, thank you. Take it in, and we get to decide how we're going to use that information. Gunther took in what she said to him, and he sat with it for a couple days. And then he came out and told her and told the rest of us that, you know what she said is true. In fact, he had heard it from other people. And he did something that I so respect, which is, after taking an honest look at himself, he made the choice that he wanted to change that. So, here's the thing. We might be afraid of what somebody says. Rule number 2, ask them why. Because we might feel it as rejection. We might find out it's got nothing to do with us. Oh, well, that's easy. Or we might find out it does have something to do with us, and then it gives us power. It gives us information. It gives us the ability to change if we want to. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, this is an interesting story. How do I use this in my own life? Here's what I recommend. Take on spiritual law number 24. The truth shall set you, which means we actually welcome and seek out the truth. And part of that might mean we ask for feedback. How am I coming across? How does this feel to you? What do you think of that? Part of what this means is one of the characteristics required to have a vibrant life is courage. It's a desire to be honest, to see ourselves and the world honestly. And this quotation I'm about to give you is one of the most powerful, beautiful quotations I've ever heard, and I'm so grateful that I learned it just recently. And this is what Nietzsche said. The strength of a person's spirit could then be measured by how much truth he can tolerate, or more precisely, to what degree he needs it disguised, diluted, muted, falsified, or sweetened. You get that? That's the power of truth. Are we willing to see things clearly? And here's what's so magical, y'all. If we dedicate ourselves to living to our highest potential, then we become seekers of truth. When we have truth, we can change quite easily. It might hurt a little bit. If I was Gunther, I would have hurt when I heard that news. Yet, to be able to get the information, to be able to honestly assess and say, this is who I want to be, this is who I want to be, I choose this. That's powerful. Now here's the thing with truth. When we dedicate ourselves to really living up to our potential, right, which means that we have the greatest possibility for satisfaction, There's that old philosophical saying that the unexamined life is not worth living. When we dedicate ourselves to truth, to our highest potential, then we become a beacon, a magnet for truth. And when we have truth, then we have freedom. We have the ability to choose who we wish to be. If we proceed through life like, don't tell me, putting blinders on, well, then we make our lives smaller. And if you stayed with me this far through this video, I know you are someone who wants to live up to your highest potential. You're dedicated to it. You are a truth seeker. So I encourage you to take on these rules of dating from Humaniversity. Always go for your first choice. And yes, you can apply this well beyond dating, right? Have the courage to go for what matters to you most, knowing that as we evolve, rejection is nothing to be afraid of. Rejection is something to seek out, because we learn that, one, the rejection very seldom has anything to do with us. Two, if it does, well, then we have an opportunity to learn and grow and become more effective in what? Be more effective in how we are creating ourselves and creating our life. And rule number two, if somebody says no, ask them why. Make it easy for them. Make it easy by saying, hey, thank you so much for giving me your honest answer, and I'm always wanting to learn and grow. Would you be so kind as to tell me why? Right? Because a lot of times people don't want to be honest because they're afraid of they might hurt you, which is maybe not always the real reason. And if we make it easy and say, would you give that to me? I always want to learn and grow. People usually respect that and in a caring way give us their truth, which is, again, it's their truth. It's their story. It doesn't mean we take it on. We always have the freedom. We are the artist of our own life. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being dedicated to vibrant living. If you liked this video, you're probably going to like this one a lot too. Aloha.